Hello, and welcome to the Podcast Engineering Show. I'm happy to be here with you. My name is Chris Curran, and I produce podcasts for large companies and authors. And I also run Podcast Engineering School, where I teach people how to produce and engineer podcasts at a professional level. Every week on this show, we bring you podcast production techniques on a silver platter. We talk shop with podcast producers and engineers and other specialists. And then in between weeks, I bring you episodes like this where I'm going to overview some of the daily Goody blog posts I've been writing. And in this episode, I'm going to actually give you a recap of the NAB show, which was last week, actually. So anyway, I've been in podcasting for about 7 years, but I've been in audio for more than 30 years. I was in the music business in the 90s. And I have a background working on records and all that. And so that's why I'm really happy to come to the podcasting world and share a lot of my insights into audio production. And so if you implement the best of what you learn here, your podcast will sound a lot better and you'll spend less time producing them. And I really believe that you can produce really great sounding audio. I do. Even if you don't have a background in audio, you still can produce great sounding audio. Definitely. And hopefully I can help you with that. So the agenda for this episode, I'm going to give you a few announcements. Then I'm going to cover about 13 or 14 little mini blog posts. And I do it pretty quick. I don't spend too much time. And I'm going to sort of talk about each blog post, but you can definitely go to the website and see them, podcastengineeringschool.com. And after the daily goodies, I'm going to talk about NAB. And I was wondering, I wanted to give the NAB recap first, but then I realized that a lot of you listening, you might not care about that. Anyway, it's fun stuff, and we'll talk about it later. So for now, the announcements. Well, the big announcement is the contest that Focusrite is doing with me. We are giving away a Focusrite Scarlett 2i2. That's right, we're giving it away. You just got to sign up and answer. Well, you got to fill out a form and answer 4 questions, and then you're entered into the drawing, and maybe you'll win. And the URL is in the show notes, and I'm going to put it on social media too. I would read the URL, but it's too long to read. I'm not going to do that to you. Okay, next, the spring semester of Podcast Engineering School started this week, actually yesterday, Tuesday, because today's Wednesday, and this will go out tomorrow. So the next semester starts on June 25th, 2019. So if you're interested in that, check out the website for the super early bird pricing. It's now available. And if you have any questions about Podcast Engineering School, just send me an email or contact me through the website. I'm happy to chat with you because, it's an investment and it's something. I mean, I know myself, I always prefer to talk to somebody and talk it through. So I'm happy to do that with anyone who's interested in the school. Upcoming episodes, oh my goodness. You ready? Carrie Caulfield, Glenn the Geek, Sean Kitchen, Nick Dunkerley, Evo Terra, Dan Radin, Adam Gordon Bell, and Travis Vengroff. Wow. And a lot of people I met at NAB, I'm going to interview as well. So I have, how many episodes is that? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. I got 8 episodes recorded. And they're going to come out every 2 weeks. So that makes about almost 4 months worth of episodes. Of course, I do the Daily Goody episodes on the in-between weeks. And also, have you heard about Pod News? So go to podnews.net, sign up for it's a daily email, and it's a daily podcast, sort of overviewing the daily email. And the podcast is great because it's like 3 or 4 minutes. It's quick, just the news. And the email's great because you could quickly look at it and then just, click through something that interests you or just archive the email. So Pod News is great. I'm going to tell you later about how I met James Cridland at NAB, and it was great to meet him and all that. So, all right, so the daily goodies, let's get into these, right? And these, again, my objective with these little daily blog posts is not to, overwhelm you with information or give some deep dive into a topic. It's just little tidbits of audio knowledge or audio production knowledge. And it's just, again, over time, if you read them and just sort of absorb them, over time, they'll really help, okay? So please don't kill me if I don't go into too much detail on each little tiny blog post. I mean, I'm trying to be helpful. All right, so the one from March 15th, we're going to start from the March 15th blog post, and that is wavelength. Yeah, in fact, last night at the first class of Podcast Engineering School, we talk about audio fundamentals for like almost the whole first class is literally fundamentals, because you have to know the fundamentals if you're going to be messing around with audio. It helps so much. So wavelength is one of those fundamentals, and basically the wavelength is the distance that a wave travels at a certain frequency. So in the blog post, I write here like a 20 hertz wave, right? 20 hertz is like the lower end of the human hearing range. 20 hertz might be the lowest frequency you can hear. Or maybe even 25 hertz might be the lowest frequency you can hear. But a 20 hertz wave, just for one cycle, meaning, it starts at 0, goes up to +1, goes back down past 0 to -1, and then back to 0. Like a sine wave. One cycle of a sine wave for a 20 hertz wave takes 56.5 feet to unfold. That's one cycle. So the up and down takes 56 feet for the low frequencies. And that's why low frequencies can go through walls so easily. All right, so what about the mid-range? 1 kilohertz or 1,000 hertz, right? And of course, a hertz is one cycle. That's what we're talking about, one cycle here. 1 kilohertz is right in the mid-range. The wavelength is 1.13 feet. So a little over 1 foot. That's how long it takes a 1 kilohertz wave to go through one cycle. 10 kilohertz, 1.3 inches. So you can see it gets smaller and smaller. 20 kilohertz, which is probably the highest frequency you can hear, or theoretically, the human can hear at the highest, 20,000 hertz or 20 kilohertz, 0.6 inches. So about 2/3 of an inch. Anyway, so you can see the low frequency waves that it takes them a lot of distance to unfold, but the high frequencies, they go really, there's many more cycles in a shorter distance, and that, because they occur more frequently. Right? That's frequency. So anyway, but this was about wavelength. All right, to the next post about headphone amplifiers. Now, and specifically here, I was talking about if you're having like 3 or 4 people sit around a table and you want everyone to have headphones, they do make like a standalone piece of hardware that's a headphone amplifier. And you feed the signal into it, and then all 4 people, let's say, plug their headphones into this headphone amplifier. And usually everyone has their own volume control, and that's a headphone amplifier. But even when you plug your earbuds into your phone, or you plug your earbuds into your computer, the signal coming out of your phone, let's say, it's being amplified into your earbuds. So because it needs that power. And if you play anything through a speaker, it has to be amplified for that too, obviously. So anyway, headphone amps, you can get small ones. Like I have one that's pretty small. You could plug in 4 headphones and it's small. It costs like $30. So you don't have to spend a ton on a headphone amp if you don't want to. Anyway, next one, temporary podcast studios at events, right? Did you ever go to an event and you see like a little cube enclosure where they have a little table set up with a bunch of microphones? So that's like a little temporary podcast studio at events. And there was one at Podfest a couple months ago, and there was one at NAB last week. And it's funny because I wrote this blog post way before NAB, but our booth at NAB ended up being right across from the little podcast studio they had there. And I was interviewed in that booth, in that studio, by Addy Saucedo from the Podcast Planner, and one of her shows is called Modern Vintage Radio. The link to that, I'll talk about that later too, because I have a little story about that interview. Yeah. Let's just say condenser microphones with no windscreen or pop filter. All right, you got that in your mind? Okay, all right, we'll come back to that. So anyway, at Podfest, I went into the little temporary studio there, and I got to see the Rodecaster Pro and then the Rode Pod mic and all that. But These little, makeshift studios at events are interesting because sometimes they'll have a ceiling, sometimes not. If they don't have a ceiling, then all the sound just comes right into the quote unquote studio. And even if they have a ceiling, a lot of noise still gets in. So it's not even though they look like they're enclosed and it's a closed area, it's not. It's not nearly soundproof. So that's why a lot of times you want to, again, get close to the mics when you're recording, get your mouth closer to the mic so it picks up more of your voice and not the background noise. So, all right, next one. You can't evaluate the sound of a microphone while you're speaking into it. Let me say that again. You can't. You can't evaluate the sound of a microphone while you're speaking into it. A lot of places, I remember the B&H store in Manhattan has this little mic room where you can put on headphones and you can talk into all these different mics and you can, hear them. I mean, you can hear them, but the thing is, if you're the one talking, it's almost impossible to judge the sound of the mic because when you talk, you're hearing the sound of your own voice, traveling from your throat through your skull and vibrating your eardrums, right? So your voice, yes, it goes into the mic and then it's going to come around and into your headphones. You can hear that, but you're also hearing your own voice through your own skull. And by the way, that's the reason why when you hear your voice played back, when you hear a recording of your voice played back, that's why it sounds weird. It doesn't sound like you. Because to you hear yourself through your own head and your ears. But when you're hearing it when you're hearing a recording of your voice, you're not hearing it through your skull anymore. You're just hearing it from the speakers. So that's why it sounds different. So again, evaluating microphones, you gotta talk into the mic, but you have to record it and then listen to it later and then listen to it when you're not speaking into it. Okay. So I posted a little speed round in the podcast movement Facebook group. And I asked people to tell me their microphone, audio interface, audio software, headphones and or speakers, the VoIP recording services, the final episode file specs, and your secret weapon for audio production. And so this is the Daily Goody from March 19th. And this is really long because a lot of people gave me their answers, like their mic and their interface and their software. It's pretty cool. It's a pretty cool post to browse just because you could see what a lot of other people are doing. Some people just gave really short answers. Other people literally described their whole signal flow and signal chains and all that. So that's a pretty cool post, but I'm obviously not going to read it out loud because that'll take too long. All right, the next Daily Goody is the ERA Voice Leveler. This is a plugin I have not tried yet, the ERA Voice Leveler. I found it, I think Daniel J. Lewis mentioned it somewhere, and then I quickly took a look at it, and I mean, the little video online, which there's a link to in the Daily Goody here from March 20th, it's a pretty cool video. I mean, what it does is cool, and it looks like it does it really well. I'd like to try it. I think I probably will try it at some point. I don't know when, though, because I have all these plugins I want to try. A similar plugin I do use, though, on almost every voice I process is the Vocal Rider from Waves. It does a similar thing. Again, it's different, but it's similar. It's kind of like it takes the parts, like when someone's talking and then they trail off. Like they trail off like that. It'll boost up when they trail off, it'll boost that up a little bit, make it more, audible and intelligible. So anyway, Vocal Rider I've been using for a long time, and I really like it. These types of leveler plugins in general are extremely useful in podcast production to help even out the massive level fluctuations due to the lack of microphone technique demonstrated by most podcast guests, and sadly, many hosts as well. So mic technique it really is that important, because you've all recorded people that, sometimes they'll get right on the mic and yell real loud, and then they'll drift off. They'll get away from the mic and talk really softly, and it's hard to compress that and make it sound good. It's hard. because you got to use like 3 compressors and a leveler, and even then it doesn't sound right. So, man, good microphone technique, wow, goes a long way, right? Okay, next daily goodie. This is an actually email I got from Johan. Not going to use his full name, but he said he needs more mic gain. And so I actually posted our little back and forth email here. He basically wants to buy a Rode pod mic, and he heard that it's pretty much as gain hungry as the SM7B, which I'm not sure about that actually. Anyway, he was asking about gain hungry and if he can use 2 preamps, 2 microphone preamps, like run it through one preamp and then run it through another one, which, by the way, don't ever do that. I mean, in a pinch, you might have to do what you have to do, but yeah, that's not a good idea. Yeah, 2 preamp. You should only use 1 preamp, because the preamp is, well, I don't want to get too deep here, but use only one. There's other ways to boost the level. So anyway, him and I had a good back and forth about a bunch of stuff, so I'll let you read that one. And then, the next post is the last goodie bag episode I did, which was 122, which was a good one. Okay, the next daily goodie, accurately hearing low end versus high end. Okay, so when you're working on audio, you've heard me say it, the way you monitor the audio is supremely important. If you use a crappy pair of earbuds, you don't even know how your mix is going to turn out, because the earbuds are going to color the sound, and maybe in the earbuds it sounds like there's no low end, so then you add all this low end, and in those crappy earbuds it sounds good, but then you take it in the car and there's like a million times too much low end, and it's like everything's muddy. And so the way you're monitoring the audio is really, really important. So that's kind of what this post was about, because it's really, especially the high end and the low end, you kind of need to have a good balance there. Of course, the mid-range is even more important, but so one thing you can do is become very familiar with your preferred monitor. So let's say you do have crappy earbuds, which you shouldn't. You should get at least a decent pair of headphones. But let's say you have a crappy pair of earbuds. If you mix an episode on them, then bring it in the car, check it out, or bring it, listen to it on different speakers, and maybe you'll see that, it has way too much low end. So then you go back to your computer, you take out a bunch of low end, and you hear it through the crappy earbuds again. And basically you're training your ears to understand what those crappy earbuds actually sound like. And so then over time, you'll get used to it. Of course, if you buy a new pair of headphones, then you're going to have to go through that learning curve all over again. So anyway, just better to get decent headphones. You don't have to spend a ton of money, but just get something decent and then learn them. Over time, you will learn them, and then that's how you'll get good. All right, next daily goodie. The difficulty of re-recording the host's track. All right, the difficulty of re-recording the host track. All right, I recently engineered an episode where my client interviewed someone, and my client, who was the host, ended up glitching out pretty bad. And I was like, I forget if we were using Zencastr or Squadcast or what. It was one of those. But it was glitching really bad, and this is during the recording. And, a lot of times when you're in the middle of a recording, you kind of have to judge, like, should I interrupt now and try and stop this? Or, maybe it's not so bad. Or maybe, Zencastr or Squadcast maybe that file will be clean. So I was like hoping and praying that the file would be clean, and it wasn't. So after the interview ended, I downloaded all the files, and the host's file was horrendous. Like so bad that we couldn't use it. It wasn't just like, clean up some clicks and it'll be fine. No, this was horrendous. And so I brought up the idea to my client, like, hey, I said, can you get the guest again? Can you redo the interview? And they're like, oh, well, that was a pretty high profile guest, and I don't know if we can get her again. And I said, well, one thing you could do is have the host redo all his parts. Now, that is a huge pain. And here's why. If all the host did was ask the question and then be quiet, it wouldn't be so hard. But here's the thing. When someone's doing an interview and the other person's talking, they're like, oh yeah. Or they'll just interrupt a little bit like, oh yeah, oh, that must have been fun. And then the guest says, oh yeah, that was fun, yeah. And then the guest keeps going. So all the times that the host interrupts, you'd have to redo all that. Like you know what I mean? He'd have to re-perform all of that perfectly. And then me as the engineer, I'd have to line it up perfectly. And then every time they step on each other, meaning they talk at the same time, you'd have to do the same thing. Of course, some of those you could probably edit out. Also, when the host interrupted the guest and interjected a thought, you'd have to redo all them. And then, of course, the energy and the performance of the host. A lot of times when someone's doing a live interview, they're bringing the energy. And sometimes if you're going to, re-record something later, their energy is completely different. Usually it's a lot lower. Usually they start talking like this. And so how did you get started in the business? Like there's a completely different energy, and it's weird. And then, of course, lining up all the new pieces that you recorded with not only the questions, the main questions from the host, but all those little interjections and everything. Got to line everything up. And anyway, it's a nightmare. I don't wish that on anyone. And so we were literally planning with my client to do that. We literally scheduled a session to re-record his whole track. And then he rescheduled it once, then he rescheduled it again. And then I think we were recording a different interview, and we talked, and he said, yeah, I think it's just going to be too hard to do, even from his point of view, like just him. Because I told him, I'm like, you're going to have to go through the episode and basically transcribe it, and then you're going to have to perform it as exactly as you did or close to what you did. And he didn't want to do that. And I didn't want to do all that work either. So anyway, so the decision was made. Hallelujah. Thank God that we're going to scrap that interview and try to get the guest again. All right, next Daily Goody, the safe peak level for final episodes. All right, so you got the final episode audio. What peak level should you aim for? Well, you can set the true peak level to -1 or -2 dB. So I set mine to -1 dB, and some other people who are a little more cautious, they'll set it to -2 dB. But one reason you don't want to go all the way right up to 0 is that sometimes when you encode the MP3, there can be problems if audio is close to peaking. And on some players, if it's playing back audio, sometimes if it peaks real close to 0 or right up to 0, some players will or can act a little funny. Probably not. But here's the thing. It's just good practice to set your peak to -1 or -2, somewhere in that range. It's safe. It avoids a lot of problems, even if maybe there wasn't going to be a problem. It's just kind of good practice to set it there. And you can do that in a lot of different software. You can set your true peak level in Auphonic, Adobe Audition, Hindenburg, Isotope RX7, and many other applications. And then, of course, I asked in the blog post, what peak level do you set your final episodes to? And I think a couple people might have answered, but hey, that reminds me, you can comment on these daily goodies on the website. And I actually read the comments and approve them and reply too. All right, next one. Finishing an episode versus tweaking it forever. Yes. Finishing an episode versus tweaking it forever. This is a problem for people like me who really, I'm essentially a mix engineer, and I just love mixing. And I could spend a lot of time mixing and really getting things like as perfect as can be. But there's a balance, right? Finishing an episode versus tweaking it forever. We all have lives, and we need to, at some point, finish the dang episode and get it out the door. So there's a balance there, and you got to figure out that balance for yourself. Yeah. So you got to find the line where, is it done? Or do you need to do more work? Or is that good enough? And all that. So anyway, just from experience, you'll get the gist of when you should stop. And so one thing I do though sometimes is I'll experiment when I'm producing an episode. Maybe like I'll try a new plugin, or I'll try like an editing technique or something. So sometimes I just knock out episodes. Like I do the production and finish them. make it sound as good as possible, and finish it. Other times, like if I have a new plugin, I'll mess around with a new plugin. So that does add time to my production, but to me, that's like continued learning. Like that's me. Like that's what I love that, and it keeps my ears sharp, and it helps me learn a new plugin. So I think of that almost like research and development almost. So for me, it's time well spent because I need to try new plugins and I want to try new plugins. So, the episode might take a lot longer, but, I'm able to try a new plugin and really hone my ears even more and produce a better sounding episode in the end. So, all right, next one. We got a couple more. Publishing episodes immediately after they are recorded. Did you ever do that? Did you ever say, we're going to record an episode right now, and then when we're done, we're going to do some quick post-production and just, that's it, publish it, boom. So let's say you do an hour show, and then you work on it for an hour post-production, and then boom, you publish it. So I actually had a client who every Thursday he would record an interview live, and then he would send me the audio, and he told me, he's like, look, I want you to do the post-production immediately and then post it immediately. So that's okay. So what I had to do, though, is I had to block out my Thursday afternoons, right? Because I knew he was going to send it, and I knew he wanted it done. So I literally, in my calendar, had to block out that time so I didn't schedule anything else. And of course, I charged him for that because that's, hello, if I'm going to block out the calendar every week, it's not just my time. It's like it's even more valuable than just any time, right? It's a set time. So, and anyway, now I currently have a client who sends me a short episode on Thursday afternoon, and that needs to go out Friday morning. So I still have to produce that one Thursday afternoon / evening, but I have a little more time because, let's say I'm eating dinner, I can do it after dinner if I wanted to, but because it just has to be out, the next day, Friday morning. So anyway, just some interesting production thoughts here. And the last one we'll talk about today is my previous studio setup. And there's actually a picture of it on the Daily Goody itself from March 27th, 2019 on the podcastengineeringschool.com website. My previous setup, it was a monstrous setup. I had a mixer. I had 5 computers. I had a channel strip. I had compressors. I had my iPad, a backup recorder. I had a huge audio interface, 5 audio interfaces, a phone line, a digital hybrid. It's a massive setup. And the reason I had so many computers was I really liked connecting my hosts, my clients, and their guests from different computers, so I could record them on separate tracks. So I went crazy with that, but it really helped, right? So, I mean, you can do like a Skype group call, but then everyone's recorded on the same track, and plus it's Skype. Sounds horrendous. So anyway, I was using different services and recording everyone through different computers. Now everything's different for the past year and a half, pretty much because I got my iMac Pro. I switched over to Mac, got my iMac Pro, and now I do everything in the box. So I can do everything I was doing with basically 5 computers, I can do with this one computer. And I do it using Audio Hijack and Loopback from Rogue Amoeba. And I made some videos about that before. So anyway, that's it. You can read more in the little post here. But I was actually very happy to simplify my my setup. I mean, I liked having the big monster setup, and that's actually one of the setups I teach in podcast engineering school, because quite often people will have 2 computers, or they'll have, an iPad, a computer, and a Rodecaster Pro, or, and then you got to understand how all the audio connects and how to run audio from here to there and mix minuses and everything. So that in podcast engineering school, I teach, like, we build up to the most intricate and confusing setup that you would ever come across. I teach that. So when my students understand that, then in the real world, when they come across the simple setup, comparatively simple, it's easy, right? It's like, oh, it's only 2 computers and a this and that. Oh, that's easy. So that's part of what I teach in the school. All right, so those are the daily goodies. Now I'll give my NAB recap. NAB was awesome. It was 4 days on the exhibit floor. It's every year. It's in April in Vegas. NAB stands for National Association of Broadcasters. And for the past few years, I'm not sure how many, they've had a little area called the Podcast Pavilion. And a lot of podcasting companies, they put in this one little area, and it's awesome. And I've been helping them with the Ask the Expert booth. So I was there, and I had a few booth mates. Addy Saucedo from, well, she's the podcast planner. Do you guys know that? I mean, you should go to her website immediately. I think it's thepodcastplanner.com. Anyway, Addy wrote a book called The Podcast Planner, which helps beginners. She also has a show called Modern Vintage Radio, which she interviewed me on in the podcast studio that was right across from our booth at NAB, the one I mentioned earlier. And yeah, it's so weird. They literally have like, I think it was 3 or 4 mics set up. They're all condenser mics, like large diaphragm condensers with no pop filters or nothing. And so I put on the headphones and I got close to the mic, because I like to, usually I like to be close to the mic. And I was trying to pop some P's, some plosives. And oh my God, they were just like almost destroying the mic or the sound, not destroying the mic. Just, you could hear the compressor, like just as soon as I would say a plosive, the compressor would suck in and it was sounding really weird. And I asked the guy, I'm like, without a windscreen, these mics handle the plosives okay? And he's like, oh yeah. He's like, I got a compressor on all the mics. And I was thinking to myself, okay. Okay. And so anyway, Addy and I had a really great interview. I don't know when it's coming out, but it was a fun interview actually. And it went by so fast. It's like, I always forget when I'm a guest on a show, the time flies so fast. I mean, when I'm the host, it flies pretty fast too. But man, 35 minutes with Addy, it literally went by. It felt like, I'm not kidding, felt like 5 minutes. It was just done. And I'm like, wait, how long was that? She's like, about 35 minutes. I was like, no way. No way. You crazy? Remember the Barry clip? No way. You crazy? All right. And then the other thing, the other folks who were with me was Ralph and Carol Lynn Rivera from Podcasters Toolbox, which is going to launch at some point. That's right. Anyway, Ralph and Carol Lynn were there. They're great people, great friends, and we had a great time. And anyway, we were all there answering people's questions in the Ask the Expert booth. It was really fun. So I also met Brandon Gonzales, who's a previous guest on this show, episode 84. Although that's back when I used to call them, what did I call them? Sessions. Session 84. Yeah, it was only, and then I would always forget to say session. I'd say episode anyway, and I'd be like, no, I mean session. But anyway, after episode 100, I decided, all right, since literally, even after 100 episodes, I couldn't get it right. I'm like, I'm just calling them episodes. Thank you. So if you go back and listen to episodes before episode 100, you'll hear me call them sessions. And anyway, Brandon Gonzales was on episode 84. He stopped by. I think he lives in California, so he just drove out to Vegas. So that was great. You can go listen to his episode. Of course, I met there Dan Hughley from Focusrite. They had a big booth, which was displaying a lot of their more higher-end Focusrite gear. He works for Focusrite. And he interviewed me, too, on his show. And on his show, it didn't launch yet. So, actually, I'm not even sure about the name. But anyway, on his show, he interviewed Addy Saucedo for his first episode, and he interviewed me for his second episode. And anyway, it was a lot of fun. So right near the Podcast Pavilion was the booth for SSL, which stands for Solid State Logic, and they make some of the most high-end consoles in the world. And I met this guy, Fernando, there, and he actually let me sit at one of the live sound consoles, and I was like mixing a live concert for like 45 minutes Sunday night. It was the night before NAB started, and I actually posted a picture of that on Instagram, I think, too. But it was so cool, like the new console, and he showed me how it worked. And anyway, Fernando from SSL lives in Denver, which is like maybe an hour and 15 minutes away from where I live in Colorado Springs. So I was asking him, like, hey, man, can we do something? And anyway, we might talk about some of that. All right, Waves, I use a lot of Waves plugins. I dropped by their booth. But, I said hello. They didn't. Anyway, when I was standing right there, I started talking to, Greg Laney from Apogee was there. Apogee's makes great audio products as well. He was standing there. So I started talking to Greg Laney from Apogee, and he told me about the Ambio headset, which is like these little earbuds for like $300 that have microphones on them, and then they record like in 3D sound. And he says it's really awesome. And it's a Sennheiser Ambio headset or something like that. But I think the converters and something else inside of it are made by Apogee. So that's why Greg Laney, hopefully he'll be on my show soon. I met Joel from Sound Devices again. My buddy Joel, Sound Devices had a really big booth, pretty close to us, like 75 feet from us. And here's the thing, if you don't know, NAB is the third biggest show in the United States, over 100,000 people. And there are so many huge rooms with vendors in it. I mean, when I say huge, I mean huge. Like to walk from one end to the other, it would probably take you 15 minutes. I'm not joking. Most of those halls are probably a half a mile long. I'm not kidding. It's stupid big. And so the fact that Joel and Sound Devices were right pretty much 75 feet away was awesome. Also, Michelle from Heil, she was there with the Heil booth. She's going to be on this show at some point soon. Mark Bakos from Cleanfeed. Remember? He was on an episode of this show within the last 6 months or 9 months. I met Ira from Samson. And so Samson makes the Q2U, right? The USB, the XLR/USB microphone that is comparable to the famous ATR 2100 microphone. Anyway, Ira was there. He showed me a new mic that they're developed, but it's not for sale. And he told me, he's like, "Oh, you can't tell anyone about this." So, I mean, I'm saying that I saw a mic, but I really don't know what the model number is. I don't know what it is. But anyway, they're going to have a mic come out soon, which I believe will be similar to like it'll be a competitor to, let's say, I don't know, the RE20 and the SM7B, like that level of dynamic mic, like a broadcast dynamic mic. So that'll be interesting. And I'm sure Bandrew from Podcastage will check that one out and review it for us all, right? All right. Also, Gina Clement from Gator. Gator makes stands, and I recently started some of my clients who, put an ATR 2100 on their desk. I found this Gator stand. It's like a little desktop stand, which is pretty cool. And so anyway, they stopped by and said hi, and I'm like, "Hey, you're from Gator." I said, "I tell my clients to buy that one stand," and they're like, "Oh yeah, the GFW 0822." Literally like that off the top of that. I'm like, "Wait, like the product numbers?" And they're like, "Oh yeah." And then I thought about it. I'm like, "Oh yeah, I guess they would. It's their company." But anyway, it's a telescoping boom mic stand. But anyway, it's good to meet Gina. All right, I met Ariel Nissenblatt from Earbuds Podcast Collective. And she has an email list, which Podcast Engineering School might appear in her email list. I don't know. But she does an event or two as well. I met Ever Gonzales in person. Ever Gonzales. He organizes the Outlier Podcast Festival. It's a traveling national event held in major cities across the U.S. OutlierCS.com is the URL. It'll be in the show notes. And he's having a event in Denver in July, so I got to find a way to be there. So anyway, that was cool to meet him. I met Zachary Davis from Sound Education, which is a conference for educational audio producers and listeners. So it's called Sound Education. Soundeducation.fm is the website. And anyway, we were talking about me going there too. Man, I'm going to be doing a lot of traveling. All right, I met the folks from a company called Audionamics, and they want me to try this plugin called IDC, Instant Dialogue Cleaner. And it's actually, remember we were just talking about the daily goodies that, I'm thinking of the ERA plugin I just talked about. That's a leveler, so that rides the volume. This instant dialogue cleaner takes out background noise. So it's kind of like the denoise in Isotope and other DAWs as well. So I don't know. It's a plugin. They're like, hey, would you try it? And I'm like, hey, I'll try it if I have time. I met this guy, Steve Ranke. He lives in Colorado Springs, and he's an engineer for Focus on the Family, which apparently is a show or a bunch of shows or a network or something. Focus on the Family. I have to check that out. But he's like, yeah, come by the studio. I'll give you a tour. So that would be cool. Maybe I'll take some video when I go by because it's right here in my hometown. And have you guys ever heard of Mic Me? M-I-K-M-E, Mic Me. It's that little, it's like a box. It's a microphone that connects Bluetooth to your phone and stuff. And it's a condenser. It's like a really good mic. And you can just set it between you and have a conversation with someone. Anyway, I met the CEO, Philip, there, and he was showing me the Mic Me. And they have another product too, which is it like a lavalier or a headset? I think it's a lavalier. I forget if he had the mic on his head or if it was like clipped to his shirt. Anyway, but it's either a headset or a lavalier that now can also go straight to your phone on Bluetooth. So that's pretty cool. So we went to the podcast movement meetup in Vegas because Dan and Jared were there at NAB, and they threw a podcast movement meetup at this bar. And so anyway, we went, and I ended up talking with Dave Jackson and James Cridland and a bunch of other people. Addy was there, and Esprit Devora was there. And anyway, this woman was there. Her name is Sarah Logan Gregory. And, we're like, hey, how you doing? What's your show? And she's like, I host the Emerging Infectious Diseases podcast. And, it just makes you smile. Emerging Infectious Diseases. And then we're sitting there, and Dave Jackson and me and James Cridland are talking to her. And then Dave Jackson just made a comment like, oh, yeah, you talk about infectious diseases. And the woman goes, emerging infectious diseases. And Dave was like, oh, no, not just regular infectious diseases, like the latest and greatest emerging infectious diseases. So Dave, look out for Dave Jackson's podcast rodeo show. He's going to be, I think he's going to review that show. So, all right. Michael Goodman from Centrance. I didn't get to talk to him much. I met Mark Ethier, the CEO of Isotope. Yeah, they had a booth, which I didn't get to visit, but I met Mark, and so we talked about maybe having one of their engineers on the show again. I already had a guest from Isotope. It was Dan Gonzales from Isotope, which was episode 102. That was a really good one. I always love episode 100, 101, 102, and 103. Like those 4 episodes in a row, it's just dropping the great episodes one after another. Anyway, I liked them. I don't know. What did you think? So I also met Roger Cloud, who gave me a cloud lifter. He literally gave. So now I'm going to try the cloud lifter and talk about it and see how and where I can use it. And anyway, Cloud, the company, also makes a bunch of ribbon microphones. Him and I were talking about it. And I'm like, hey, do you make a ribbon mic that's affordable for podcasters? And basically the answer is no, because I think the cheapest ribbon mic they make is like $1,500. So, but I kind of want to try one. I don't know. It's been a few years now. I want to try a few ribbon microphones. I just want to try it. But I mean, I'm not going to, buy them for that price. But anyway, maybe there's a way I can try it. And like I mentioned, I did meet James Cridland from Pod News. Definitely sign up for that daily newsletter. And people I did not meet was this guy, Duran Gleaves from Adobe. He was supposed to stop by the booth, but I'm sure they were very busy. I think they had their own booth and all that. I'm sure it was a big operation as well. And also there was a representative from Rode at the B&H booth, which I didn't get to stop by there either. I just wanted to meet someone from Rode and say hello, basically. Seems like everyone else in the world has gotten to try the Rodecaster Pro except me. But I don't need to. You know what I mean? Like I don't know. It's not something I would personally use. So, I don't need one. And you guys know me. Like I'm not like a gear slut. And by the way, if you look on gearsluts.com, they answer a lot of audio questions there. Did you know that? But I'm not that guy. I'm not like, I don't like all my contacts in the industry. Like I'm not the guy who's like, oh, can you give me some gear? Give me some gear. Like I'm the opposite of that guy. Like I don't want anything. I mean, some things I want and usually I buy it. I love buying all the equipment that I have because then I'm not beholden to them to say good things or whatever. If I buy it, I could say whatever I want. And that's the nature of this show. That's the nature of me as a person, right? I don't, even this show, I don't have any sponsors, although I'm going to have a sponsor soon. But it's funny, the sponsor is having to chase me down and just try to finalize this deal because I don't know. I mean, it's a company that I love and you guys will hear about it soon. But I mean, I'm not against sponsors, but I don't want to like cheesily promote stuff and, get gear and like, I'm not that guy, Anyway, I think you guys get that. So anyway, a reminder. Oh, funny. We were just talking about sponsors. Oh, remember our contest. Win a Focusrite Scarlett 2i2. That's right. Check out the URL in the show notes. You can sign up. You have to answer 4 questions and you might win a 2i2. And I also posted about it on social media so that you can, if you look on the Twitter or Facebook for Podcast Engineering School, you'll see it. Wow, this went pretty long, but it's not too long. I mean, I don't know. These Daily Goody recap episodes, like, I think the first 1 or 2 I did were like maybe 25 minutes, or was there one that was like 20 minutes? I don't know. They were pretty quick, and I like that. I kind of like just being quick and having a short episode. But of course, this episode's different because I'm talking about NAB and all that stuff. So, I mean, I don't know if you care about it, but, and NAB, look, you can get into the exhibit floor for free. Like you can, like about a month or 2 before NAB starts, you can sign up and get a free ticket to the exhibit floor. So, and trust me, there's no way in 4 days you can see everything. You probably can't even see a quarter of it in 4 days. I'm not kidding. So, but anyway, there's all these big companies, all the latest gear. It's really, it's typically for broadcasters, for radio and TV. But again, they got the podcast pavilion. So who knows? Let's see what they do next year. Let's see what they plan next year. And anyway, it was fun. But again, I don't know if you're just a regular podcaster, like, you don't really need to fly to Vegas and, spend $200 a night on a hotel room for 5 days, right? That's a lot of money. Anyway, that's it for this episode. I hope you enjoyed it. Appreciate you listening. And of course, if you have any questions, always contact me. Send me an email, or especially on the daily goodies, the little blog posts on the website. If you just read them every day, if you have a question, just put your question in there and spark some conversation. It's really good. And let me know if I can help you in any way. All right. Well, we'll see y'all next week with a great interview from, it's Carrie Caulfield, which was awesome. All right. See you then. Peace.